So one thing you can always count on in this sinful world is that human ingenuity is going to be used to develop better, more efficient ways of killing and defending oneself from being killed. In other words, war. In Matthew chapter 24, where Jesus gives his famous Sermon on the Mount of Olives to a small group of his disciples, talking about the end of the world and his second coming, he tells them, "And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass. But the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom." In the parallel record in the Gospel of Luke chapter 21, Jesus says, "But when ye shall hear of wars and commotions, be not terrified, for these things must first come to pass. But the end is not by and by." These words are still very relevant to us today as we wait for the second coming of Jesus. They were, of course, spoken to the ancient Jews of his time, talking about calamities that were going to befall them and put an end to that age. But like all of Jesus' words, they are meant for his believers. Who has an ear, let him hear. What I say unto one, I say unto all, watch. While we wait for the second coming of Jesus, we will see things happen around us, and we should not let those things trouble us, because things will happen that are contrary to the will of God. As long as man is ruling on earth, man will make mistakes, man will do things that are wrong. But rather than letting those things trouble us, we must persist in doing the will of God, letting our light shine, as Jesus says, while we wait expectantly for his return. The global arms trade has always been an interesting indicator of kind of where we're at, what's going on in history. Pretty much from the beginning of international trade, there has been exchange of weapons. Back in the late Middle Ages into early modern times, people were exchanging different firearm technology. Advances in steel making allowed countries in Europe to export high quality blades to countries all around the world. There has been a trade in horses going on back into ancient times. In the Old Testament, we read about trade in horses and also in chariots that were manufactured and bred in Egypt and then exported to Israel to build up King Solomon's army. When we read about the destruction of Great Babylon in Revelation chapter 18, some of the exports that Babylon is noted for are horses and chariots. Again, these weapon systems that this great Babylon is exporting and corrupting the world with. If we look around the world today, what countries come to mind when we think of major weapons producers and exporters? Well, certainly we would think of the United States and its very large and robust and high-tech defense industry. I'm sure Russia also comes to mind, and a number of European countries too, France, United Kingdom, Germany. And yes, those countries and others are continue to be major arms exporters to this day. But some interesting shifts have been happening over the years. Russia, for example, has seen a massive decline in their arms exports. Meanwhile, the Russian arms industry is growing very quickly, especially with this war in Ukraine. So what's happening there? Well, certainly as Russian domestic military spending goes up, their arms exports will be bought up more and more domestically and will not be available for export. And into this vacuum, other countries are coming to fill the void. The United States' share of the global's arms market has increased. So has the share of France, and other smaller exporters are seeing their share go up drastically. Italy, Turkey, small dollar amounts, but dramatic percentage increases over what they once exported. As we're seeing in so many ways, as the world develops, as the third world becomes more and more a thing of the past, and developing nations become more and more developed, we're seeing a great diversification in the arms industry. Iran, for example, has had a fairly robust arms export to Russia itself. But maybe the biggest shift going on is that so many countries around the world are developing local arms industry to supply their own military forces, while global arms trade has been fairly stable over the decades. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. We're significantly lower now than we used to be before the fall of the Soviet Union, for example. Yet spending on the military has certainly increased, again, as many countries move out of being third world into more developed and industrialized. As their GDP goes up, as their government expenditures go up, they spend a lot more on defense and security. And as a part of that process, so many of these countries are buying from and therefore financing and developing their own local arms industries. We've seen this in cases like India developing their own fighter planes, their own tanks. We see this even in a country like Mexico with very limited military spending, yet they have their own domestically produced main battle rifle. And recent wars have really started to show us that the very expensive and high-tech weapon systems may not be as decisive on the battlefield as much cheaper systems, like just simply having good communication, good GPS systems, improvised use of drones. These simpler, cheaper systems that are widely available to pretty much anyone in the world can be bought from any number of civilian manufacturers, can have a huge impact on the battlefield in ways that are happening unexpectedly, as the bigger, more traditional arms developers and manufacturers have been focused on much higher end, more expensive, complicated systems. As we see in the war like the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and in previous wars too, like the very long war that was fought by Iraq and Syria and Iran and Lebanon against these different jihadist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Those wars have been showing how a country might need to respond to a long-term conflict. Advanced weapon systems that take a long time to produce and a long time to replace and repair can't be counted on in the way that cheaper, more easily available systems end up being relied on. The war in Syria and Iraq brought us the use of anti-tank guided missiles on a squad level as anti-personnel weapons, remote-controlled tanks, remote-controlled aircraft delivering explosives, and these developments have continued and been amplified in the war in Ukraine. So countries all around the world are watching, they're rethinking their strategies of how they're going to build their armed forces, what kind of systems they need to focus on, and what are the vulnerabilities of very renowned weapon systems that had never been tried in combat before, as they have been now. So one thing you can always count on in this sinful world is that human ingenuity is going to be used to develop better, more efficient ways of killing and defending oneself from being killed. In other words, war. And in this age of internet, 3D printing, cheap and fast communications, we're seeing explosive growth in the amount of innovation being devoted to war. So again, back to the topic of arms exports, we see changes there. Some countries that have been traditionally large exporters have significantly fallen in their exports, while other countries are coming up. And I think we're going to continue to see surprising changes in these trends over time as more and more countries apply more and more innovation, both for their own local needs and for export. Long gone are the days when you had on the one hand the United States and on the other hand the Soviet Union and their client states bought from them. We are in many ways entering a more and more multipolar world, and the changes in the arms industry are reflecting that. Well, please let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below, and I look forward to talking to you again later. Bye for now.